Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, this is Sporting Logically, and today is a video that's been pretty highly requested ever since I started doing team previews a few weeks back. The 2018-19 season preview for the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is a team that certainly had a disappointing season a year ago, with a ton of ups and downs during the regular season, followed by a first round playoff exit at the hands of the Utah Jazz. Today I'm going to talk about what the Thunder did this offseason, what concerns I still have, and what the expectation should be for this year's team, as well as my own prediction for where they will finish this coming season. Let's go ahead and get started. Going into this summer, I was not optimistic at all about how the Thunder's offseason would go. I thought Paul George was for sure leaving for LA, that the team would be unable to find a reasonable trade for Carmelo Anthony, and that they likely wouldn't be willing to bring back forward Jeremy Grant on a market level deal. Well, it turns out, as I'm unafraid to admit, I was dead wrong. In fact, when it comes to what Oklahoma City was able to accomplish relative to my own expectations for their offseason, they are in the running and maybe even the favorites for the best offseason of any team across the league. First up, let's get the obvious one out of the way, bringing back wing Paul George on a 4-year max deal. This was wrapped up shockingly early in the free agency process, and apparently PG didn't even take a meeting with the Lakers. Like I said, I thought it was a done deal that PG would be in LA, and they would bring in LeBron or Boogie to play alongside him, leaving Russell Westbrook standing out in the cold once again. But apparently George's relationship with and loyalty to his point guard was among the biggest reasons he felt inclined to re-sign, along with how the city embraced him upon his arrival. This is honestly one of the most shocking turnarounds in a 12-month period I can remember. Keep in mind that OKC wasn't one of the teams on his trade wish list a year ago, and his agent has said that the Thunder likely wouldn't even have gotten a free agent meeting this summer had they not traded for him in the first place. And now here we are heading into next season with George fully committed to the franchise, choosing to stay over returning to not only what is considered his hometown team, but also arguably the most prestigious organization in the league. Despite how the season ended up, George had a great year and was a third-team All-NBA selection, the fourth of his career. His defense and off-ball shooting proved to be invaluable to a team without many versatile two-way wings, while his playmaking ability was put to good use when Russ and or Melo were off the floor. With Melo now elsewhere, a move that I'll get to a bit later, things should open up even more for George, as his ball-stopping presence will be replaced with more complementary options. Bringing back PG was always going to be the first domino that decided how the rest of the summer went for OKC. And since they were able to get that done so quickly, GM Sam Presti and the rest of the front office quickly went to work filling out the rest of the roster. Next up was re-signing forward Jeremy Grant to a 3-year $27 million contract. Grant is a player that flew under the radar for a good amount of the regular season, but his athleticism and defensive versatility proved to be an invaluable part of their more successful stretches of their series against the Jazz, and those two skills vaulted him ahead of Carmelo Anthony in the rotation at times, much to the displeasure of the 10-time All-Star. Even in a market in which there weren't a ton of teams with the cap space to bid against them, this is a solid deal for both the player and the team. Although Grant does a lot of things well defensively, is a solid finisher at the rim, and provides the roster with some much needed bounce and positional flexibility, his perimeter game is still very much a work in progress. His three-point shooting inefficiency specifically is really holding him back from having a much larger two-way impact. Playing off of the talented primary ball handlers and playmakers the Thunder have on the roster, two of which have well-documented struggles shooting the three themselves, Grant will need to improve as a floor spacer to give those guys the necessary room to operate. Even with that said, he is still just 24 years old, has plenty of room still to grow as a player, and is on a fair contract, making it a very smart move on the part of the front office in Oklahoma City to bring him back. Next up was the signing of center Nerlens Noel to a 2-year minimum level deal. This was a pretty big shocker to me, partly because I was so focused on other bigger name free agents and how their impact would be felt around the league at the time that Noel signed his deal, but also because I would have expected somebody to take a flyer $4 to $5 million a year deal on the former 6th overall pick. As it turns out, the lack of cap space, questions about his health, and the strange situation surrounding his lack of playing time in Dallas were enough to bring down his value to the point that the Thunder might have gotten one of the bigger steals of the summer. If he's healthy, which I get can be a big if not only for Noel specifically, but for big men in general, he can be one of the best defensive bigs in the entire league. There hasn't been a ton of evidence to support that claim recently, but that could be just as a result of getting himself so far into Rick Carlisle's doghouse that he wasn't granted the opportunity to truly show his skills. Keep in mind that this is a guy that showed extreme promise in his first 2 seasons in Philadelphia, and sure, those teams weren't great to say the least, but the fact that he was able to be so productive in what was really a dumpster fire of a situation to walk into as a rookie in the early years of the process is impressive. There are obviously big question marks about how he'll perform this season, as he's only appeared in 81 games the past 2 years combined, but if he can regain his old form, he could prove to be a fantastic defensive and high energy big off the bench behind Steven Adams. And now we get to what is, in my opinion, one of the most surprising moves of the NBA offseason. The Thunder trading Carmelo Anthony and some other assets to the Atlanta Hawks for Dennis Schroeder. I know that the trade was more complicated than that, but for this video, I'm just going to focus on the 2 big names. To say that the Carmelo Anthony experiment didn't exactly work out as planned in year 1 in OKC would be an understatement. He never really looked comfortable as a third option, begging for mid-post isolation touches and struggling to find a consistent rhythm from the field or from 3. He had his moments, but it was just really never a great fit. And as his minutes became more and more limited in the postseason, and his relationship with head coach Billy Donovan became even more strained, it was clear that he wouldn't be on the Thunder roster this coming season. The problem was, with such a large 1-year salary, limited teams with the cap space to take on his deal, and a no-trade clause in hand, trade options were extremely limited. After buyout negotiations stalled out, the situation seemed to be at a standstill. That was of course until Sam Presti pulled another rabbit out of his hat, not only managing to dump Melo's salary and save the team a ton of money, but also bring back a solid piece in the 24-year-old guard from Germany. He had some issues of his own in Atlanta, and a change of scenery was likely what he needed as well. But I can't stress enough how impressive it is that the team managed to get back a player of his caliber in exchange for Anthony. Though his lack of a consistent perimeter jump shot is an issue that I will cover later, he's reportedly already accepted a 6-man role as a change of pace guard behind Russell Westbrook. And with or without those 2 on the floor at the same time, the team is looking to play at a rapid pace next year. There really isn't much else to say here, as even though there are some questions in terms of fit, you can't really argue with the value they got in return for a guy that was never going to suit up for them this season anyway. Okay, now with the offseason moves addressed and the glowing praise to the front office handed out, let's get to some issues I see with the Thunder for next year. The first thing that comes to mind is simply the enormous cost associated with this roster. Even though they were able to shed a huge amount of salary and luxury tax cost with the Melo trade, this collection of players still doesn't come cheap. This was always going to be the case if the team managed to bring back Paul George, but as a small market team, every dollar counts. And even though signings like Noel and Grant are considered bargains on the surface, you have to account for the luxury tax cost as well in this scenario. This isn't inherently a huge deal, as you have to spend big money to be a contender in the NBA. But that's just the problem. Are the Thunder truly a contender? Even with their shiny new additions, have they added or subtracted enough from the team that didn't even win a single playoff series a season ago to justify the cost they will incur? Are they an upper tier team in the West, able to compete with the Warriors and the Rockets at their best? At this point, that is ultimately a matter of opinion mostly, but the fact that they're paying this much money and aren't for sure one of the top teams in their conference is a concern. Second, from a more on-court perspective, a recurring issue from a season ago is likely to rear its ugly head once again next season: a lack of floor spacing across multiple positions. This wasn't for a lack of attempts last year, as they finished 11th in 3-point attempts per game, but their efficiency wasn't quite there to say the least, finishing 23rd in the league in 3-point percentage. When you look at the roster moving forward, how many above average 3-point shooters do they have? Alex Abrinas and Patrick Patterson are pretty solid, even though I wouldn't consider either to be great two-way players, and George is obviously the best shooter on the team. But who else is proven to be a knockdown shooter from 3-point range that will provide the offense with proper spacing? Unless they're planning on rolling out good old Kyle Singler, I don't see many options on the roster as currently constructed. As an alternative to modern spacing, the team will need to be a great defensive unit that plays at a fast pace and gets easy buckets in transition. They have the personnel to make it work, and 5-man units with an engaged Russell Westbrook alongside any combination of George, Andre Robertson, Grant, Noel, and Adams have the potential to be among the best defensive units in the league. In order to make up for their lack of shooting, the Thunder might have little choice but to play an ugly brand of basketball by today's standards. And even though zigging while the rest of the league is zagging could work, it's still concerning how little space their stars will have in which to operate next year. With everything now covered, it's time to finish up by talking about what should be expected of the Thunder this coming season. Based solely off the financial investment and the talent level they have on the team, I think the expectation should be a top 4 seed in the West and at least one playoff series victory, with the potential to reach the conference finals if a few things go their way. They have 2 big-time stars in Westbrook and George, and if the team as a whole can buy into the defense-first mentality that they will have to adopt, they could really turn some heads in the West. With the subtraction of the distractions of the Melo situation and a few new pieces, along with the return of a hopefully healthy Andre Robertson, they certainly shouldn't regress from their 4th place finish in the conference a season ago, even with LeBron now in LA. For me personally, I would have to agree with those expectations of a top 4 seed, but ultimately I don't think the Thunder will get past the second round of the postseason. They have plenty of talent, sure, but I just don't see them getting past either the Rockets or the Warriors in the playoffs, and with those 2 teams likely to land the 1st and 2nd seeds, the Thunder will have to take one of them down in order to reach the conference finals. Crazier things have happened and the Rockets have fallen off a bit with a loss of a few crucial wings, but in the end I still see the Thunder as a 2nd-tier team in the West. I loved what they did this offseason and they could have a very interesting style of play moving forward, but ultimately I don't think they have enough to challenge either Houston or Golden State next year. And there you have it, my 2018-19 season preview for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Once again, my name is Tucker, this has been Sporting Logically. If you missed any of my previous Monday, Wednesday, Friday videos, be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.